Tonight, I couldn't be more thrilled. I am chatting with Ann Nesbet, and we're going to be discussing her new book, Daring Darleen, Queen of the Screen. Ann, how are you this evening?
I'm pretty good. All things considered. I mean, we have a beautiful spring happening here in California. I think maybe the nicest spread of poppies we've ever had. So it's okay. And we've got 5 people in the house, 3 of them home from college for quarantine and sheltering in place, and a dog. And so it's busy and lively and never dull.
That's excellent. We're getting started just a little bit late tonight because my 6-year-old is adjusting to his new routine of no school and stayed awake just a little bit later than usual, and we can't have him in the background. So now, hopefully, knock on wood, he is sleeping soundly, and we're going to be all right. So probably a good place to start is I try never to summarize other people's books or other people's biographies because I'm terrible at both. And why would you want to listen to me tell you about you when you're right there and could tell esteemed audience about yourself? So if you would give esteemed audience an overview of your background.
Well, I'm somebody who teaches. I'm in 2 different departments. I'm in the film and media department at Berkeley, and I'm also in the Slavic department, teaching Russian literature. So I have a kind of Russia hat, and I have a film studies, film history hat. And then I have a third hat, which is the one I guess I'm wearing right now, which is writing books for kids. So Daring Darleen, Queen of the Screen is my 6th book for the middle grade audience. And the first 3 were fantasies, like Cabinet of Verse and Box of Gargoyles and The Wrinkled Crown, and they came out with HarperCollins. And then I've done 3 historical novels with Candlewick, Cloud and Wallfish, which was a friendship and spying novel set in East Berlin in 1989. And then The Orphan Band of Springdale, which is set in 1941 in rural Maine, and is about family secrets and music. And then the new one, Daring Darleen, Queen of the Screen, which is set in 1914 in the Hollywood of its day, which was Fort Lee, New Jersey.
So you are a well-rounded person of many talents. It sounds like you do a little bit of everything.
Many activities, anyway, right? I'm busy. It's true.
Was that always the plan, was to do a little bit of everything, or have you just kind of fallen into it as time has gone on?
I think it's more, you follow, there are certain strands that run through your life and you follow them. And sometimes you hang on to that thread and sometimes you're sort of forgetting and you're hanging on to another one. But I was always writing stories from childhood on, and I started being more serious about it, I guess, when I started teaching. And then eventually I had a couple strokes of good fortune, and I found an editor who was interested in my first book, and never stopped after that.
Well, esteemed audience loves a good origin story, so let's start there. When did you write your first book, and how did you go about having this good story?
Okay, so the first book has quite a story to it. I was on sabbatical, and we were living in Paris, and I took the family. We all went, and we lived there for the year. And I threw the girls cruelly into the local public schools, and the twins' school was right across the street from a library and right kitty corner from this incredible building that had vines growing over it and heads of cows holding up the balcony and so on and so forth. Just amazing building from the early 20th century. And I looked at that and I thought, I'm pretty sure that that's the kind of place wizards and magicians would live. And so I wrote a book called The Cabinet of Earth. And this was the fourth novel I'd written. The first 2 were science fiction for grown-ups, or I thought for grown-ups. And the third one which I was still also finishing at this time, was just for grown-ups. And the first two had never been picked up by anybody, although I'd had, nice comments and so on. But this time I was like, okay, I'm going to do this seriously, da-da-da-da-da-da. And so I joined the local chapter of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and they had a really wonderful Paris chapter, actually. And one day, the editor, Rosemary Brosnan from HarperCollins, she's a fantastic person and fantastic editor. She came to Paris to talk to our group. Only she was supposed to talk to a couple of us on one-on-ones at various points, and a friend of mine called up who was running things and said, Anne, everybody's canceled, blah, 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 blah. Would you mind meeting with her right now instead of, with everybody else tomorrow? And I was like, oh, okay. So I walk over to this cafe where I'm supposed to meet with her. And then somebody comes out who was the one who was supposed to meet with her before and says, you know what? She's really sick right now. I said, oh, okay. So she's asking if you'd come up to her hotel room to have your meeting. So I said, okay. So then we have this amazing scene in a teeny tiny Paris hotel room with poor Rosemary Brosnan in the bed, looking very, very green, and me perched in the little chair. And I handed her the opening chapters of A Cabinet of Earth, and she was reading them and laughing. And I thought, oh, okay. I would try to notice where she was laughing. And then she said, I don't usually say this, but when you're done, send this to me. And so that was really the beginning. Actually, she got sicker and ended up in the hospital the next day. So if I hadn't met her then, I would not have at all. But she was wonderful, and eventually that's the book that became my first published children's book, 2012. So some years after our hotel room encounter.
How many years later was that?
I guess that was in 2008, so 4 years later.
So that must have been quite the amazing experience that she comes out of the hospital. She's like, whew, I'm so glad that that's over and I've survived, because now I need to reach out to Ann Nesbet and I have to get this book.
Yeah, I don't know if the timeline was exactly like that, but certainly I felt incredibly fortunate. And I've been incredibly lucky in all of my editors, I have to say. I think editors are the most amazing people on earth. They read things with such love and precision, and it's just an incredible thing. When I talk to students, I often show pictures of an editorial letter that I've gotten, and actually any of my editorial letters would do, because they've all been 13, 14 pages long, single-spaced, and then they'll start with, oh, Anne, this is so wonderful. This is going to be so great. And, that lasts for, 2 sentences. And then you get 12 pages of everything that's wrong, and all the holes and all the gaps. And the students are always groaning, right, when I show them my 13-page editorial letters. And then I say, no, it's this incredible gift of love. If somebody is paying that close attention to something that you're making, it's an incredible gift. So I actually really appreciate editors and teachers. Anybody who gives revision advice is a hero in my book. Anybody who reads things closely.
And I assume that usually you don't have to sit there nervously while they read your book.
No, that was a one-off.
That might be one of the most terrifying things I've ever heard. I'm okay with a 13, 14-page editorial letter, but sitting there and watching an editor go through your manuscript, you must have nerves.
I know. Somebody who is experiencing nausea at that moment. Right. Yeah. That is very nerve-wracking. It's true.
And is your editor usually the first person to see your manuscript, or who gives you notes and revision prior to an editor?
Oh, that's a good question. It really varies. So right now, I'm working with Kaylin Adair. She was the editor for all 3 of my Candlewick books, including Daring Darleen, and she is incredible. What can I say? There was this period towards the end of revising Daring Darleen where she was like reading things and I was trying to fix them, and things were going back and forth across the continent, and this was happening in real time, which is of course rare in the editing situation, because generally speaking, what happens is you get your 13 pages of comments, and then you spend ages wrestling with them to make it work out, and then you send, hopefully, your revised version, you hope that it's better, off to the editor, and then, ages later, she has time to look at it and so on. But there was one particular phase with Daring Darleen where we were under the gun and, had to get this absolutely sealed up in a few days. And that was really, I think, the most fun I've ever had in my entire life.